Next, protests continue in Chile, calling for justice for the disappeared. The people who simply vanished during almost a quarter of a century of dictatorship. Almost 1,500 people, at least. The anniversary of the actual coup d'etat was yesterday, 50 years ago. By day 2, today's date, September the 12th, 1973, 7,000 people have been rounded up, arrested by the military junta. General Augusto Pinochet will be declared the new president the following day, September the 13th. A hardline right-wing dictatorship replaced an elected left-wing socialist government of Salvador Allende. Our guest, Raquel Garrido, has a personal story to share about how her family was affected. Raquel is a member of the National Assembly here in France, a much-heard voice of the left, but joining us now to tell us a different story. Raquel, a very good evening to you. You're a French MP, but born in Chile.
Yes, good evening, Mark, and thank you for having me on your show in this very important day, 50 years ago, yesterday.
Your parents were badly affected by what happened, which led to your family leaving the country.
Exactly. During the Salvador Allende government, those years, the government was called Unidad Popular, Popular Unity. My parents were young, 20 years old, and they supported Salvador Allende. And on September 11th, all of that youth was detained. Most of my uncles and aunts were detained, tortured, and most of my family had to leave in exile in different countries because you would go in those days during the dictatorship, you would go to an embassy, but according to where the military were in the city you went to this embassy or another. So I have family in Denmark, I have family in England, I have family in Canada. We went to Canada in 1975, and then we came to France in 1988.
In terms of the figures, 7,000 people on this day back in 1973 were rounded up, arrested, including probably your parents. That figure, 7,000, to people listening may feel so strange and amorphous, but you're giving us a real personal angle on this one. You say people were beaten, tortured. Did your parents talk about what happened?
Yes, it took them quite a long time to voice it out to me, but my dad told me about when he was detained and tortured. My mother says that she actually blacked it out of her mind and doesn't recall how in one morning she was in Valparaiso in the port, and one morning she was outside and she doesn't remember how. I think it's a way for her to I guess survive. And when we were in Canada and also in France, my parents sang in community gatherings that were called peñas. They were solidarity gatherings where we would sing. And my sister and I have a younger sister, she was born in Canada. We also sang all of those songs. And Salvador Allende's government was supported especially by two young groups, one called Inti Imani and the other one called Quilapayún. They were very, very important. And there's a very heard song that is called El Pueblo Unido Jamás Será Vencido. I think people who are listening know that song. It's gone universal, viral among the ages, and I think it's very strong to have this sense that Salvador Allende has been gone for 50 years, but actually he's not gone. Actually, he's right here with us, and he helps us, including me as a member of parliament. He helped me to think about politics and to decide what politics to do, to choose, and how to be as a politician with a very strong sense of democratic ethics.
Indeed. People might disagree with how you are politically, Raquel, but no one can dispute or disagree with how you've turned adversity into success. You've managed to make a good life for yourself, a great career for yourself, and take people's cases forward too, both in your legal work and in your political work. I'm wondering what your thoughts are now. It's 50 years since Pinochet took power. Clearly, a brutal regime over almost a quarter of a century. What are your feelings about that period now? What are your feelings about what happens next?
I think it's very hard to imagine because in those days the population of Chile was 10 million, and there were 3,000 dead that were killed. It's as if in France today, in today's France with 60 million population, a military coup would come and kill 20,000 political leaders of the left. That's how important was the killing in September 1973 and the years after. I think it's really hard to imagine. And those who were detained, are it's even more, and exiled. We're talking about tens of thousands of people. And some of those people who were killed are disappeared. We don't have their bodies yet. And I think it's quite normal that the families ask for justice and truth. And I feel that the current president of Chile, Boric, has been very firm on that. He's going to help on that search.
You feel that will happen? That this politician's promise will be kept?
I hope so. I think that the state's administration and efforts are into it. But it's a hard search, and maybe it'll take longer because the search wasn't very efficient for many years. Because there was this idea in Chile that we had to put everything under the rug so that peace could come about. There was a sense of impunity. Pardon can exist. You can forgive people, but you need justice before. You need truth. And that part is still ongoing in Chile.
Indeed, that idea of truth and reconciliation is extremely important. I'm wondering, Raquel, have you managed to return to Chile? Do you have any views on that?
Yes, I've been a lot since the return of democracy. In 1988, there was a referendum that overthrew General Pinochet. And after that, I started going back with my family and my kids. I have 3 kids, 3 daughters. They go a lot to Chile. They speak Spanish. I spoke Spanish to my children so that they could speak with their grandparents. And I sing those Chilean songs. I organized a concert last Saturday, where we sang with my children, my father, and musician friends, all these songs from Latin American struggles, and Chile's history. It's very, very lively, and it's very important for me because there's this history that goes from one generation to another by arts and music and a language and a culture, and it's very important for me.
Raquel, the role of the United States in the possible role of the United States in the overthrow of Allende. Clearly, this is something that people are talking about today. Do you have any insight on that? Any thoughts on that?
Well, historians have done the job. There's also been unclassified documents that were declassified in 2023 that show that Kissinger and the Nixon government were exactly aware of what was going on. And there's an important strike of truckers, that Teamsters, that paralyzed the country against Salvador Allende in '72, so that there would be no food, or there would be a poverty organized. And that was directly financed by the CIA, by the United States. It's very clear that the United States did not want a socialist government elected, a democratically elected socialist government to prosper in South America, because it would be a model for all the other countries in America, and Washington tends to think that the whole continent is their country.
And the later sheltering of Pinochet by the Thatcher government in the United Kingdom, again, something that must really stick in the craw, as we say in English, of someone. From your perspective, how could the UK do such a thing? Possibly is a question you might have been asking.
Well, it was ambivalent, because first he was detained, so we had hope that he would be go under judgment, under judicial review. But then he was freed, and it takes time to have justice, and people who are powerful in Chile and with help of England didn't allow for justice to come about in that instance. That's bad, because I think the seeds of peace need justice. But the people of Chile, I think, are doing a great job to recover history, the truth. It's being taught more and more in Chilean schools, although it's still something that is hard to handle. It seems to be that there's a part of Chile that thinks that Pinochet was right, and the other that Salvador Allende was a leader and a democratic idol. But it's up to historians also to establish facts. And I think that it's normal for a society to have different opinions about things, but we can't have different opinions about facts. That's science, that's history. And sometimes in Chile, there's this idea that it's your opinion that matters. No, in this case, it's not an opinion. This is a military overthrow. It's not. There's no way to justify it, and especially not the violation of human rights that ensued that military coup.
Raquel Garrido, as always, thank you for joining us here in France 24. We always appreciate your time, but thank you for this particular interview you've given us, talking about your family's experiences because of that coup led by Pinochet in what was your home country, and perhaps still is perhaps your home country in your heart, Chile. Thank you for joining us, Raquel. Pleasure speaking to you.
Chile, Canada, and France. It's the International Scholarship of Exile, but it's good and bad, and as you said, we make good things from those terrible days.
Raquel, thank you very much indeed. Great to see you. Thank you very much. Raquel Garrido there joining us from her home in Paris.